So back to the whole game reviews thing. Back to the idea of spending time. You mentioned The Witcher. I missed the time when I could spend time playing The Witcher because I finished it, I think, twice, and the second time I did pretty much everything in it. But that took me like 50 to 70 hours.
Yeah, also I remember spending a lot of time going around the multiple merchants trying to get dog tallow.
Yeah.
I needed it for, I don't know, I think it was a sword oil or something I needed.
For alchemy. But I can't really spend that much time dedicated to a single game anymore, even if it's for work, even if it's for review. I just can't find the time, especially when I look at it from a monetary point of view, because I do this as a job, and we have a schedule with all the shows we need to do, and if I put a review there, I know that everything around it will suffer. I can't dedicate so much time to that one show so that everything around it will suffer, and that's why I sort of stopped making reviews. I only do them when it's like contractually obligation from a press key or something, and I told Raul to try to avoid something that comes attached to "you must review this thing," because I'm not gonna have time to actually do a proper job of it. It's kind of sad, actually.
And that's very true. On the other hand, I'm somewhat in a similar boat, but on the other hand, this has allowed me at least to play so many more titles than I would have played otherwise. I mean, it comes with, it has advantages and disadvantages. Sure, I can't spend 200 more hours in Fallout 4, although I would have liked to, but I'm having issues with it. Goddamn Windows. But since I can't do that, I do play at least one title, and generally I have to play a couple of titles at the same time so that I can have a fresh one each week. And that has immensely increased my level of knowledge and experience relating to everything that is that has to do with gaming.
You've broadened your horizons, but at the same time, if you had spent another 200 hours in Fallout 4, you would have been able to make a really awesome review of Fallout 4, because I've seen reviews of games from people that have spent hundreds of hours in them, and they understand that game. They can describe it in ways that makes a review written by somebody that does it professionally, writes review professionally, seem like just a barely tangential connection to the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. But there is always this. Whenever. No, let me start over.
It's breadth versus depth.
As you age, and this goes out to our younger listeners, which they have no idea what we're going to talk about right now.
You're going to go bald.
But they're going to get to that point. Some of you. Look at your dad. Sorry about that. If it's shiny, I apologize. I don't apologize. I mean, you might want to invest in some of that stem cell research. Anyway, tangent. As you grow older, more experience, as you age, you notice that life is so much less about whether it's black or white, or whether it's or whether things are actually clear cut, and it's more about there is a lot of gray there. There is a lot of compromises that have to be made. There is a lot of balancing that you have to learn how to do so that you can live as happy or as satisfied or as whatever your goal in life is. And this applies to basically everything, that whatever you do in your waking life will have to go through this process of compromise, basically. And this is very true when it comes to what we do, because unfortunately our main medium right now is YouTube. It's not a medium, but our main platform is YouTube, and YouTube really doesn't incentivize us in creating super duper content. It incentivizes us to make daily content.
It does sort of
quantity.
It does tend to put in the recommended section videos that are a bit longer, but other than that, it doesn't really let you get away with making content like once a month, unless you're something like Retro Ahoy that makes content once a
sure.
year.
There's a couple of exceptions here and there, obviously, but I'm talking from my perspective of a small channel. I barely have over 1,300 subscribers, and it's really tough because I can't upload daily. But all of the data shows that the more stuff you put out up there, the easier or the faster the channel grows. So on the other hand, that 200-hour Fallout review might have been the bee's knees, but it's just been one upload in maybe a month. And I know I've just seen what happens if I don't upload something for a month. My view count and my watch time tanks like a motherfucker.
Yeah, I know that when I had my little health issue, there was nothing posted on Games Arena for over a month, and there was no recovery from that. The channel died.
I've still not recovered. And I've been for the entire month of August. I've posted twice a week, which I wasn't doing before at all. So again, thankfully, I'm not dependent on YouTube because it is a passion. But I would like for all of the work and effort I put into my videos, I would like for more people to be able to see them. But yeah, whatever. That's life. And again, it comes with a compromise. Do I want to make those super duper detailed videos and only upload them once a month and no one will see them? Or do I try to make a bit less detailed sort of videos and maybe a couple of people actually see them and one or two of those actually comment and it has an actual impact on them? Depends on what your goal is,
Well, if you're making daily content, I have one very, very important tip for you. Don't. Making daily content, it is actually good, especially if you're doing something else in parallel, like another job, is hard. That's why some of our shows tend to be half-assed quite often. You see it quite a lot. I tend to not try to half-ass the year.game series, which is why that takes about 2 days to actually make. Mostly I write it in the first day, and then the second day I realized, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and rewrite it and record it and edit it. The editing is quite sloppy because I don't have time to properly edit it. So add dramatic pauses like I did at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's one sort of a compromise you have to do. Do you scrim? Do you cut a bit of quality or finesse in order to actually get it done when you said you get it done? Yeah, that's a decision each of us has to make on a creative level. It's whether or not you're satisfied. As creators, we're almost never satisfied with what we put out there. But that's also another thing one has to learn is to, at a certain point, just cut it loose and start on something new. Because if you spend too much time perfecting it, then you'll just not do anything.
Yeah. Also, I also made a very, very important rule for myself. I will sleep. When I'm tired, I will sleep.
It's a good idea to sleep.
I used to sort of skip over this rule when I was working at Games Arena because I was doing it all. I love doing that, doing what I was doing. I was doing it out of passion, also being paid, which was a win-win. But I would be at the point where I would be writing something, fall asleep on the keyboard, and while asleep, still writing. And when I woke up, I would see, okay, this is wrong, but yeah, that's okay, that's okay. I would still be writing like half asleep with my eyes closed.
Also, you were younger, so that's again something that you could do back then. Maybe you could abuse it.
Like 4 years ago, I wasn't all that younger.
Okay, well, granted, when I was younger, I could abuse my body much more than I can now. But the fact that I need sleep has always been a thing. So yeah, getting sleep is so important. Getting sleep and enough water. See, this is my geek health tip for the day. Anyway,
if sleep wasn't an issue, I would be probably doing more reviews, especially different kinds of reviews. I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, which is in part 1. Well, I think it may be part 1. It depends when we're going to cut this because it's kind of this may be a 2-part episode if you're watching this.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be a 2-parter.
So I mentioned that I identified 3 categories of reviews: the consumer-focused ones, the critique, and the entertainment. I started doing them through the consumer-focused ones because this game has this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this is okay, this was better than this game.
And there's definite value in that.
Yeah, that was more of the I think it's called the old style game journalism, because you're speaking more about the as an objective you're taking the game like it's a car, like you're reviewing a car basically.
Yeah.
Not in the Top Gear sense, but you're saying that this has wheels, it runs like this. And then there's the new style journalism where you're talking about your experience with the game, how it made you feel, how it influenced you, stuff like that. You're talking about your playthrough. Which is, it's kind of weird because old and new sort of started at the same point, but one of them is a bit different. It's they called it new for some reason. And I drifted into the critique bit where I try to give the developers as much feedback as possible and try to highlight what's good about the game, even though it may be a complete and utter crap storm. For example, there was the PC version of the Iron Man game that came out in 2008. We had a port of the Wii version, not the Xbox version that had actual graphics, and the game was terrible, but it had a power management system for your costume that you could switch on the fly, and that gave it it made it a bit fun because when you would max out the power on one feature of your costume, you would get different abilities, and that actually made it fun for a bit, a tiny bit. But the game was still horrible.
No, sure.
Same with the Hulk. I think there was Activision sort of hated the PC back then and would only give us ports of the Wii games. The Hulk game that came out for the Hulk movie then, that was a carbon copy, a poorly made one, of the Hulk Ultimate Destruction, made by, I think it was not Radical, the people that made Prototype as well. I think it may be Radical. And even though it was a poor carbon copy, on the PC back then, you could not get a better game of that style. It wasn't great. It was kind of in terms of structure, but the sheer fun you could have with picking up a bus, tearing it in half, using those halves as gloves, and punching a building, that was amazing. Like, the game could have been just about that, and for the most part it was. There was so little structure to it, so little actual good structure to it, that thankfully the gameplay of it compensated. I really enjoyed it.
Sometimes though, when a game makes a particularly emotional impact on you, you do mention that in the review, regardless of the type of review. Thinking about my Bastion review, for instance, in which the music, the soundtrack really spoke to me on a deep emotional level.
I have that on my playlist of everything. Basically, it's beautiful.
Yeah. But I interrupted you. So you would want to make more of those types or more of the entertainment type?
Actually, I would say more of the entertainment because I made only one review that I could say was made purely for entertainment and because I wanted to do that style. It was I usually don't qualify my history shows as reviews because I'm just drifting down memory lane and half remembering things most of the time. But in this one, I actually took the time to play Frank Herbert's tune. I call it Frank Herbert's tune because that's how they spell it, with a C and a K in the game.
Okay.
You know what kind of game you're in for. And by then I had watched a lot of Spoonie's reviews back then. I was really impressed by his approach to reviewing Final Fantasy VIII. I was amazed by it. And I did sort of a similar style with that game. And it was right after I got a webcam when I started doing the new show. And I did this during the winter break when I didn't have any shows to do other than planning future shows. And I took the time, I played the game, I recorded hours and hours of footage from it. I got it together, I filmed myself doing reactions and stupid stuff and blasted, memey things like whenever they would misspell Freeman as Freeman, I'd pop up a picture of Gordon Freeman.
Of course.
Like you do.
And those are always funny, but man, they take a lot of time to edit.
Yeah, I know, and there was had two Benny Hill chase sequences because the AI in the game is kind of terrible bad and you have to run around after it. And you sort of get caught in a loop of chasing people around. I love doing that, but it took 3 days to do it. And I can't afford that kind of time.
Of course, unfortunately, nowadays you can't. Maybe, back at least back when Spoonie was doing it, you could post shit like even weeks apart, because there was literally not as much content out there, not yet anyway.
Yeah, but
Nowadays,
GameStar now was still doing daily content. Sometimes even 2 shows or 1 article and a show a day. But because it was the winter break, I had time to do it, and I so
true.
wish I could have afforded the time to do stuff like that more. But not like often, because doing it properly is not easy, and you can't be expected to do it like on a dime.
I know. It is annoying, but sometimes, occasionally, you just feel like you need to do it, just to stretch a bit in your in your creative and in your writing, especially. I like to write jokes. I love to write jokes, or at least what I consider to be jokes. But again, the jokes they need context, they need setup, they need a punchline, they need things around them to work. You can just write jokes and they're funny. No, it's like it's a whole method, it's a whole art in creating those and writing those things. So besides the occasional reference or riff or just sort of thing. And that's why I also stopped doing the more the more spoony or nostalgia critics type of reviews, is again because they took so long. They took a lot of time, and I started doing those when competition on the internet was already quite high. There was the content was already there. So yeah, that's that. Yeah. But I think what we haven't, I mean, I don't think I know for sure what we haven't yet talked about in terms of reviews, whether be they for movies or games, is how we feel about review scores.
Yeah, initially when I started working, review scores were a must-have. They were managed by the outlet I was working for, so I did my best to add a proper review score. But fundamentally, I think review scores are meaningless because they are completely subjective. They do not translate well between different areas, mostly because of school. Like at your school, was a 7 a good grade?
Again, it depends. For some students, maybe it was a good grade. For others, it wasn't a good grade.
I keep hearing like Angry Joe, for example, says that 5 is an average. A 5 at college for us is a fail at an exam. If you get a 5, you fail.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, we have to clarify. Romania system is from 1 to 10. So all the numbers between 1 and 10. 5 in what is it called? Not primary school, secondary school, and high school. A 5 is a minimal pass. But in university, it's not a pass. It's you didn't fail, but you're gonna have to take the exam again, sort of grade.
Yeah, everybody puts different weights on the grades. They count it differently.
Yeah, even if you should have, that was another issue, that there was never really like a clear standard, a clear industry standard for grades.
Everybody makes up their own constantly.
Yeah, which again is they're basically compounding on the subjectivity of scoring art, which is, you wouldn't really score Da Vinci or a Matisse painting, would you? I mean, you would score it in terms of how pristine it is, but that's a different thing. You won't score it in terms of its quality, because it's inherently subjective. There is the subjectivity of that, and then there was the further subjectivity that every outlet was doing their own shit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was never into the scoring with the numbers. Because again, yeah, they're inherently subjective.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that drove it home to me was scratches. what do I call it? Adventure game.
Yeah, it's kind of an adventure game. It's a first person.
It's a first person adventure game. Yeah, in the style of somehow in the style of Myst, but it's with a horror theme. Which I really loved. I really loved playing scratches, and I saw the scores at the time were really bad. They were like, and I was like, oh, okay, so these fuckers have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, because the game is objectively good.
Mm-hmm.
It's a solid story. It's really interesting. Has a bit of a twist in that. It's great. And ever since that time, I was like, fuck this, and I don't care about scores. Plus, a lot of the movies I truly enjoy watching are horrible movies, which have really poor scores. So that just goes to show that that number means nothing to it should mean nothing, because again, it's kind of in the eye of the beholder.
Mm-hmm. Well,
at the very most, I would be okay with there used to be some very famous movie critics in America called Siskel and Ebert,
mm-hmm.
and they would just give a movie a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
They also give later on they would give a rating out of 4 stars.
Yeah, they I think they kind of started the star rating, but initially it was thumbs up and thumbs down. And
but what's important is that they would usually give different scores. Like there were 2 of them reviewing the same movie and giving different interpretations of it.
Exactly, and they would argue for their interpretations, which is basically what we do, or at least what I try to do when I review things. I talk about what the game does, what it could do better, and then I just say whether or not I think it's a good game and you should maybe get it, or wishlist it and wait for a sale, or if it's a thing you like, then go for it, because it's definitely solid. So I think I would only go as high as either suggesting it, or telling you to maybe wait for a sale or something like that, if you're just like in the ballpark. But giving numbers, it always seemed such a waste of mental bandwidth. That you look on IMDb, oh, this has a 7.4. What the fuck does that mean?
It means that a bunch of people scored it 7, and a bunch of them scored it 6, and some of them scored it 8.
And again, I'm like, how am I supposed to translate that into anything that is? And that's why I prefer watching reviews or reading reviews from people who do the stuff we do, and they go into a bit of detail, not in a spoilery detail in terms of movies, but they let me know if they let me know if the various components that make up the movie and the movie itself or the game itself is so much more than the sum of their components. But they tell me if the components are good or are okay, and then they create something, a finished product that is awesome, then I'm interested. I much rather know that than it has a 7.4. Okay, sure. I'm 6 feet tall.
But at the same time, the score also has a very important part to play in the marketing of the article itself.
Yeah, I know, and that irks me to know it. It's insane. I just prefer to not think about it. It annoys me so much that we as a culture decide whether or not something should be seen and or played based on other people's impression illustrated via a number.
Yeah, a number that may be amplified, like in its extremity, by the sheer fact that if it's closer to one number or another one, that article would get more clicks, more attention, more hate even.
Yeah, not to mention the other issues relating to especially internet voting.
Yeah.
So that annoys me to no end, because I did used to spend a lot of time, and I still do spend quite a bit of time and effort in watching or playing my preferred media, and then talking about them and it does annoy me somewhere deep in the back of my mind that apparently, at least as a mainstream sort of culture, people don't really give a shit to hear anything about how the movie or how the game is made or how it sounds or whether the soundtrack is interesting or whether the cutscenes are cool or whether the frames are very well designed or something. No, they just want to know if it's a 7 or lower or higher. That's their decision making. That's as far as they'll go in order to make an informed decision, and that's a huge load of dog shit.
Yep.
Because it not only shows I don't want to say disrespect because that's just too much of it's too harsh of a word. It shows a lack of intellectual curiosity. So it not only shows a lack of intellectual curiosity, but it also shows the fact that the attention span, when I touched upon this earlier, and I think I touched upon this in general in my rants, the attention span of the average internet user is measurable in nanoseconds, I think.
I know a lot of people, when they read the news I post on the place where I work at, will sometimes read half the title and then comment.
Yeah.
And be outraged.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just something I simply cannot. I understand why it happens. I understand how it happens, but I don't understand why it happens. I don't understand the internal dynamics of those individuals' minds. It's like as far as I'm concerned, it's like they're aliens. They're this completely different sort of. They came from a different time and space, and they're just learning now how this whole human culture things. Human music works, and they have no clue. They have no clue about context. They have no clue about sarcasm, irony, self-irony, jokes, nuance. They can't even spell or fucking say nuance. Anything about subtlety and things like that. So those are my gripes when it comes to the horrible idea that the numbering system, any sort of scoring system, is for games. You know what you can score with numbers? Restaurants. That's the only thing that you're allowed to score. Because is the food good? Yeah, 10. Is the food shit?
There's actually an issue with that because Yelp was caught sort of weighing the reviews and sort of blackmailing restaurants. Hey, do you want your score to not go down? Pay us this much. They were caught doing that.
Yeah, that's that's a different thing. But I'm just talking about in an age before the internet, let's say, when you would read about restaurant critiques and whatnot.
Yeah, they give them stars, like 5-star restaurants.
That in that circumstance makes sense because it's really easy to decide. It's not necessarily easy, but it's a really clear cut sort of thing.
Yeah, because those stars like define something specific. Does it have these features?
Is the food good or no? Good or not? It's not like that. That's not really that arguable. If there's a lot of salt in the stew, then there's the stew has too much salt. Mm-hmm. It's not that's not. Sure, there might be a couple of motherfuckers out there who really love salty stew. We're not talking to you. We're talking to the mainstream who likes the averagely salted stew, I guess.
Same thing with hotels. Like, they have star ratings, and those stars mean something. A 5-star means that you're not going to have a room that's barely big enough to fit your bed, and maybe the bathroom is shared with somebody else.
Yeah,
that's a 1-star. Maybe.
Exactly. So again, in that circumstance, those industries have standards.
Yeah, gaming doesn't.
Scoring standards, and in gaming, that's not a thing. Also, not in movies either, which is fucking odd. These two industries generate so much revenue right now, and it's mind-boggling how unorganized how unorganized the consumption of them is. It's very haphazard if you think about it, when compared to the examples we just gave earlier, like restaurants and hotels, which basically do more. I mean, both of them offer services, and in movies and games, it's a product. But you can kind of put an equal sign between the two categories.
There's the further issue of review scores, because we're still gonna talk about this for a while. When it comes to game, well, even movies sometimes, they are all put together in aggregators, and one of the biggest ones is Metacritic. And that service has stated itself that it weighs and interprets the score. So if you give something a score of 4 stars out of 4 stars, they interpret that as 10 out of 10 and add it to their number. When it tries to make an average, it tries to put together scores that were not meant to be put together, and then some of them, because they come from a bigger site like GameSpot, they are given preferential treatment. That they value more in what was usually supposed to be just adding and then making simple equation. It's a bit annoying.
And again, I don't understand. Again, probably because there is no real, like you said earlier, there is no union for the people who work in gaming. Because I think if that would exist, then it would spur on the existence of other institutions, standardizing institutions, regulatory institutions.
Because thanks to Metacritic, Obsidian was screwed out of a couple of $1 million because Fallout New Vegas got 1 point lower than 80. It got a 79 because somewhere out there, some asshole gave it a 5.
Well, from what I understand, initially the game was kind of buggy, so yeah.
Yeah, but still, as buggy as it wasn't super buggy compared to pretty much every Bethesda game. And Bethesda could have said, yeah, it was because I'm buggy, but it was kind of our fault. We made you ship the game in 18 months, so we can only do something.
That was surprising. It was pretty surprising what they had. That's why the DLCs are so strong with New Vegas, I think.
Because they had more time. Yeah, it's annoying and shocking that could happen. But I had to keep review scores for my reviews for a long time. But I did start doing things to them. For example, at some of them I would just, for the people that wanted something to condense the entire review into a single phrase, I would give them to them. For example, Might and Magic X Legacy, which is the 10th Might and Magic game, is like sleeping in a small bed with 3 other people. You won't be cold. The bed is soft, but you're gonna have a knee in your spine, and wait. You have a knee in your spine, and your foot is numb because you haven't been able to move it for the last couple of hours.
I see.
So it's a nice game, but it's not all that great. One time I was a bit on a kick with vegetable references for some reason. I think one of the can't remember exactly which game was, but I think it was one of the Spider-Man games. It's like the last pea in the pod. It's the same as the other peas, but this one's the last one. Because all the Spider-Man games up to pretty much the last one were the same.
That one's a bit abstract.
Yeah, but it's as abstract as the score itself.
I guess.
Well, I did used to kind of joke that I tell people that I review scores, that I put the scores from 1 to 10, but secretly it's from 0 to 11, just so they wouldn't feel bad.
Nice.
If they get a lower score, unless it's Duke Nukem Forever, that gets a 0.
Yeah, well, what can you do about the Duke? And the method, the way in which I sort of not really combat it, because it's not, I just don't follow or don't really read or don't really give a shit about outlets that offer scores, numbered scores, without the review itself actually offering me some value. Because look, for instance, Angry Joe, back when he used to review video games, because apparently he stopped doing that for a while. He hasn't. I think he's done a couple of them, but lately, I don't know, not a lot. Not in his old sort of style. He used to, at the end of the review, he had a score and whether or not it got Angry Joe seal of approval and whatnot. Sure. But up until that point, he just went through what's good about the game, what's bad about the game. And there were situations in which I completely disagreed with his standards and whatnot. So I considered some things worse and I considered some things better. But at least the information was there in the review that I could make up my own mind. I did the number at the end really had nothing to do with my opinion on the game. So I feel that the only way to really combat this scoring thing is for everyone who gives a shit about reviewing games or movies on that hand to actually find a couple of reviewers whose opinion they value, whether or not it's a reviewer that they tend to mostly agree with, or a reviewer that they tend to maybe not always agree with, but they do make some valid points, and follow those reviewers and see what they have to say about particular titles and engage with them. Because now I'm talking about small fries such as myself and you, and and support those reviewers and get into contact with them and interact with their reviews to see and maybe to get a better understanding of how their particular process works, and why they did something. If you don't agree with something, ask. Don't troll, or don't just write an angry comment. Just maybe, asking on the internet is not even a lost art. It never existed.
Well, it did exist. I think there's some famous memes about it with, hey, how does this thing work? Or, hey, is this a friendly server? And the answer would be, well, I can't repeat the words on YouTube.
Yeah.
But you get the idea.
So I think that's and definitely as we drift or go full speed into a way of consuming our media in a very customized sort of way, because even especially on something like Netflix tends to show you what things that kind of look like the things you watched. It's not really that good of an algorithm, to be honest, but it's what happens. It happens in Netflix, it happens in YouTube and whatnot. And the only way in which you will actually, at a certain point, get valid information or information you value is to make sure that you've already found a couple of sources that offer as varied information as possible, both pro and con, so that you can make your own decision on whether or not something deserves your time and or money.
It's a very good way of approaching things, because if what you were to do if you just visit site like GameSpot or IGN and take every one of their reviews at face value and think that, oh yeah, IGN says that this is how it is and this is how it must be, they're not really doing it right, because a lot of these sites, they rarely have like in-house reviewers that handle all the reviews. Reviews take a lot of time, and they have other shows they do, other articles they do, and that falls on the staff that they have. What mostly happens is that they get freelancers to do a lot of the work of reviewing games, which is sometimes is a good thing, because you have a lot of the potential to give people voices that may not have the ability to get the kind of audience they get on GameSpot on their own, like if they launch their own site. So it's a good thing. But at the same time, you also get people that will flat out plagiarize or not play games, writing reviews just because they know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, and get work there, like for an article or two.
Yeah, that has to do more with human nature than the industry in itself. So we do have to make that differentiation. But yeah, definitely, in order to actually to make a proper decision, an informed decision, which is what I would like everyone to do in regards to more or less everything they do in their life, is to look up various sources, different sources that talk about the same subject.
Especially ones that like if you see an overly positive reaction to something, look up for a few things that are not as positive. I learned this from looking at comments of consumer reviews, basically comments on the produce products. If I tend to look at the negative ones, because if the negative ones mention something, odds are I'm gonna run into that problem at some point.
It's very possible. Yeah, that's also a different approach, but you also have to keep in mind that not really don't focus on the negative in certain cases. Keep it in mind. Yeah, obviously, always make sure that you have a backup in some circumstances, or that you know, or that you're aware. But again, you can only be aware if you seek it out and if you find trustworthy sources that won't skirt past various problems or issues that might exist with a game or movie. But we're in the game area here.
Yeah. When it comes to the game reviews, also you have to be aware of one very important thing, is that the games industry will do its absolute darndest to make sure that the right kind of reviews go out first.
Yeah,
I don't mean this through review embargoes. Review embargoes, I'm starting to not be able to talk right, are there mostly so that everybody can have their review out on the same day at the same time, so they all have the proper time to prepare themselves. Unless that review embargo is like a week after the game already shipped. In that case, something very fishy is up.
Yep.
And there's also the problem that some companies will not really let people review things properly. Electronic Arts did this with SimCity. They had people come to them and play the game on basically an empty server where there were only the reviewers playing. And that's how we got Polygon's famous, I think it was the first one was 9 out of 10 review. And then as the game was launched and people realized it was a disaster, because of the servers. Firstly, the review score got lower and lower and lower. Now they don't have review scores at all, so they don't have this problem in the future. But there was also the issue that people that played it for a couple of more hours than they were allowed to play it at the EA event started to notice that there are problems with the basic mechanics that really show up 10 hours in if you start building a bigger town, and they couldn't see that when they were reviewing the game at EA's event. So their scores were worthless. Their reviews were worthless because they were based on limited information. And Konami did the same thing with the Metal Gear Solid 5. They had people go to camps where they would review the game under the supervision of Konami. So they would make sure that nothing goes out that may, tell you the game's not done. It's a third of it is missing.
Yeah, that wasn't creepy or cultish at all.
No, not at all. I mean, so what that you can only see the last mission on YouTube? Because it's literally not in the game. They didn't even put the cinematic you have to get a collector's edition, and it's there as a bonus, the cinematic for the final mission. Because otherwise the game just sort of you do a random mission, then something pops up on the map for no reason. You go there, and that's supposed to be the final mission, but then there's this other mission that you have to see on YouTube that explains what happens to something else. But on the one hand, this is Metal Gear we're talking about, and this could have been one of Kojima's subversive troll things because the game is called Phantom Pain, so at the end it may have been designed so you would feel pain out of knowing that there's something there but it's missing.
Yeah. Out of something that's not there, but you think she should be there, you still think it's there. Could be.
You feel pain for something that's not there. So it's kind of hard to understand like from a consumer point of view, it's still a dick move.
It is.
But at a certain level, if it was intentional, you can kind of appreciate the sheer balls it took to do that.
Man, it's if that's definitely an interpretation, that's a very there is no other word other than artistic. That's that's kind of something that you would do with a piece of art. Just make people or invite people to feel something, or realize something, or imagine something.
I kind of wish that this game was actually fully completed, but
Yeah. Oh well.
But
But it's not like it's the only thing, because from what I know of the series, one of the games, maybe the second one, I think, I don't know which one, on PlayStation at least, in order to defeat a boss, you had to switch your controller to the player 2 slot in order to play. So those games have pretty much always had this sort of meta fourth wall breaking sort of thing to them, theme even. So I think you might be right with your interpretation of that. It was just this weird, subtle sort of thing, which might come out later on to be the thing.
Maybe.
And not just a dick move.
But considering how it went from there with him getting fired because the game was over budget and late, and Konami making Metal Gear Survive, that was... well, it's the last one in the franchise, probably, for reasons of not selling at all. It may be just a wishful interpretation.
We'll never know. Maybe you'll find out at a certain point.
But on the other hand, I mean, wishful interpretation is sort of part of... even if it's accidental, it may still be it may still have a point. For example, one of my favorite scenes in any movie ever made is the scene in Excalibur where Uriens is fighting Arthur, and when Arthur wins, he just gives him the sword, kneels in front of him, and asks him to knight him so that as a knight, he can offer him mercy. So after he wins, he kneels before his enemy and asks him to knight him and gives him his sword. And all that scene, you see Uriens with the sword Excalibur in his hand, visibly shaking as he's holding the sword. Now, I can interpret that as seeing that, and he looks at the sword sometimes and looks at it like he can't believe that he's holding it. I can interpret that as the sword utterly dominating him. Like him feeling the power of the sword and utterly trembling in fear. Or it could be because it was a cold day, they were knee-deep in water, cold water, and everybody on set was cold as hell. Because that's what they were. They were cold as hell. But him shaking when he holds the sword, that gives it an entirely new interpretation.
Yep, and it's sometimes one of those things that just happens on the movie set, and you just go with it because it's good. It's something that wasn't written in the script, but it turns out it's really good, man. It's sometimes, in general, when it comes to that, and I am of the philosophy of going with the flow. We have the script, which is great, and maybe we have a storyboard, or maybe we have a design plan, but let's see where this takes us, because it will almost at least when it comes to game development, what you start with is pretty close to nothing related to what you end up with.
Yeah, especially because we come into the feature of emergent gameplay, where people are playing games not like they're meant to be played in new, incredibly creative ways that the developers had no idea they could be played in.
Yeah, and some of the best experiences with gaming come from those emergent gameplay situations, and that's how you, at least nowadays, that's how you can create. That's that's what gives reputation, good reputation to a developer. That's always cool. Granted, in some circumstances, in most actually, what produces good reputation is good games, but solid games overall. But in some circumstances, those pieces of emergent gameplay just really stick with you. Like the story you said last time about that GTA mission in which you had to assassinate a guy, and instead of ramming him with a car or going into a car chase, you just sniper shot him.
Yep.
That's exactly the type of thing that literally stays with you, just like it did. That memory, you probably don't remember the rest 99.98% of playing that game, but you do remember that.
Because it's the thing that I created, and that's something that may be a bit difficult to like get across in a review. That a lot, like some games, their best feature is that they let you express yourself completely, and not just in terms of the gameplay, but in terms of the story. Mountain Blade has no story; it's just you running around doing random stuff. But it has enough elements in there with characters that can come with you, with events that randomly happen, that you can weave a story in your head about those events. You can find a deposed queen that you help regain her throne, and then suddenly she gives a castle to somebody that you were previously fighting, but then you recruited to her side, and you sort of feel like left out, like you're betrayed, because you always wanted a castle. And that's not a story. That's the game doing a random thing. But to you, that's a story.
It is. That's very true. And it will be different from someone else.
Nobody else, probably, very few other people will have that experience. So saying that the game has a good story in a review probably doesn't make sense. But it can have a good story for you if you go out and seek it.
Yeah, and that's something that you can only explain in a wider review format, and something that can definitely not be quantified in a score.
Absolutely not. The scores don't make sense, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people are just shying away from them. Polygon was the latest one to do it. Eurogamer doesn't do it. Rock Paper Shotgun doesn't do it. I don't think they actually ever did it. A lot of outlets are just avoiding scores, which is a good thing.
It is, yeah. Now if they stop plagiarizing shit, it'll be even better.
One day.
Yeah, yes. Maybe. But here's another interesting part of video game reviewing that I find myself getting into is, and I'm curious what you think about this. What do you think about, first of all, re-reviewing games? And I'm talking in one part, games that are already games that are fully released. What do you think about re-reviewing them? Maybe later on, maybe,
when they get patches, or just later on when you have
I'm talking maybe patches, and then there's the separate discussion of early access games, because now I find myself going back to some games I played 2 or a year ago, when they were just coming into early access, and now the games are still going strong and they have content and then whatnot, and I feel like I have to give them another look, because they're more or less different games now. They have way more content, they have way more things going on. In some circumstances, entire features have been added or abstracted. So what do you think about it? Do you come back to certain titles?
I actually kind of did a few times with games that are what we call living games, that they receive content routinely. One of them was X Rebirth, because the launch version of X Rebirth was horrible. It was a horrible game. And I did come back to it to see if it had improved, and made another review of it and tried to tell people if it did improve. It sort of did, but what was bad about it was still fundamentally bad about it. I did the same thing with The Crew, because I really wish that the game would have improved, and it still didn't. It kind of went from worse to worse. And thankfully, I did the same thing with MechWarrior Online. I was a bit disappointed by it when it launched out of beta. But at one point, over the years that it took them to get rid of the publisher of the game and assert some control over the actual development, it became a better game. And it is, to this day, really good. Same thing with the Rainbow Six Siege. The release version was a hacker-filled, bug-filled mess. Now it's one of the best multiplayer shooters around. And sometimes it's not even just about patches. I mentioned Metal Gear Solid 2. Initially, if you took it at face value, you would have just said, hey, it's just a rehash of the first one, we're playing as a less interesting character. But if you take your time and look back at it later when you have more perspective, you will see it as a different game. And I think there's value in going back to older games that maybe you didn't fully understand back then and giving them another shot at seeing what they were trying to be.
Yeah, I think so too. I started thinking about this when I reviewed They Are Billions, which I think, I'm pretty sure it's still in early access to a certain degree. That was in early access back then. But due to the nature of the game and to how much time I had, I could invest in it, I literally didn't get past a certain point of in-game development. So I stopped my review, and there were still buildings and technologies that I could I could build, but I had no idea I could do that because I never got to that point in the game due to, the zombies invading basically, and maybe to my play style. So I thought that one definitely, I'm going to definitely have to go back to that one and make sure I give a full picture of the game, because the video I have up now is, even though it's factual, it's incomplete.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna wait for a couple more updates, I think, and then just make another video about the new game, basically. And I have a couple more titles that I looked to my backlog of old videos, and there's a couple of titles that I reviewed as early access titles, and they're either close to or have already been released. And I think it's time to give them a look as a final product as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, early access are a bit problematic to review because they're not done. They're some of them will not even have the same form. A good example was the recently released We Happy Few. When it was first pitched on Kickstarter and released, it was a randomly generated game where you go around and try to sneak and collect stuff and survive. And that was basically, then they showed a trailer at E3 that alluded to there being a story there, to it being a bit more like Bioshock. None of that was in the game. They did add that sequence as the intro to the game to set up the world, but there was no story of that kind in the game at all. But they they got backlash because of this, because a lot of people felt after seeing the E3 trailer that they were tricked. And they bought the game based on a lie. But they decided, okay, we're not going to release the game as this. We are going to delay it for a year, and we're going to give you that story. And now it's a completely different game. Well, not entirely completely different, but it is very different than the boring, randomly generated thing it used to be at first. It's so changed. And even the Divinity Original Sin, in the early access phase, it had a different... the story had different angles to it. And honestly, the way it was phrasing things with how the universe ended seemed a bit better than, a dragon ate it, and returning going to fight a dragon. No, it was about entropy killing the universe, and you finding a way to stop the inevitable death of the universe. After the early access, they personified that as an actual enemy, a dragon.
Probably because that was a bit it might have been a bit too abstract or too over the head of the majority of. Probably goes to show that maybe the gaming audience in general, even the RPG gaming audience, maybe they're not ready for the return of the Avatar as they were in the initial Ultimas.
Mm-hmm.
Because having that sort of a game now, I don't know. It will still be hella cool, but I think people would prefer. People now, gamers now are used to they're either used.
They want to fight something.
Yeah, first of all, they're used to that. They're much more action oriented, but they're either used to the BioWare approach of you're either again quoting, somewhat paraphrasing Yahtzee, you're either Mother Teresa on a good day or a baby eating vampire choice system. So it's either super duper good or evilness. And I think some of them would want to be able to create an evil avatar. And I think maybe that option should be available. I don't know. I'm not designing that, but that may be a thing. But on the other hand, I'm pretty sure they're not ready for the lack of a boss fight at the end.
Yeah, that was a thing in the Matrix Path of Neo as well, which some people say is a horrible game, but I actually enjoyed the combat system in it. It was certainly a better game than Entered Matrix. At the end, the series ends with Neo fighting
Agent Smith.
I was almost said Agent 47.
Agent Smith. Okay.
Yeah, and then he loses and sort of he corrupts Agent Smith and blows him up. That's how it ends. Spoiler for the Matrix.
Yeah, woo.
In the game, the developers of the game show up on screen like his little dolls and say, we know that the movies ended a certain way, but we feel that would kind of suck for a video game. So instead, you're going to fight a Agent Smith made out of millions of smaller Agent Smiths. Have fun.
Point taken.
That's how the game ends. You fight a giant Agent Smith.
Sometimes you do need that denouement, man. You do need that final boss fight. It's something that unfortunately has been drilled into our gamer subconscious, and yeah, literally doing that. I really don't know if you can do that and have the game be successful, even if it is this sort of deep philosophical discussion of virtue and or maybe lack of virtue again in designing Ultima. So which ones are we talking about? We're talking about redesigning 4, 5, 6.
4, 5, 6, yeah. Those were the ones about you becoming the avatar, you realizing that your religion is corrupted, and then
people can watch your videos on that. So redesigning 4, 5, 6 now. I feel that the expectation would be there to be able to choose what type of avatar you are, or what type of philosophy you wish to impart to the world, of the realm, I guess, of Britannia. So I don't think that obviously won't work with the overall framework of what
I think it would, but you'd have to make a system that takes into account the philosophy that you yourself are trying to conceive, and then a second game completely twist it to its extremes.
Yeah, exactly. That would be that would be difficult to win. I don't think I don't know if they could. I don't know if there's enough there. There's definitely enough material. It can be made into a trilogy, but I was thinking just remaking all of the 3 games as one game, as one giant.
Yeah,
quote,
I'm not sure.
Quote unquote.
I don't think it could ever work as a single game because when it's in multiple games, you have time to think about stuff in between them.
That is also true, indeed. Okay, now I'm pedaling back now. You're right. You do need separate games because you need some sort of a
time to reflect.
Also closure for each story. But that's just the thing. I don't know if you remake Ultima 4 and you end it like Ultima 4. I don't know if you can make a 5. You understand where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
Even though 5 and 6 are more, they end with boss fights basically. But the first one doesn't. The first one is kind of a sort of an open-ended narrative.
It's about
You
you becoming a better person.
Yeah, it's definitely about you becoming a better person, and at the same time, creating a belief system for an entire realm.
Hmm.
And I think that would be definitely interesting to look into and explore, and then maybe maybe plan out all three of them and don't Mass Effect it basically.
Hmm.
But because from what I understand, you could import your saves from the first and the second one in Mass
Yeah,
Effect.
yeah, and all the actions that you made would be kept, and you would see slight references to them as time went on.
So the something similar is done in Tyranny as well, in which Tyranny basically starts way into the action of whatever is going on in the realm of Tyranny, but before that you can play like a tiny mini game, like a tiny narrative mini game in which you choose the major historical sort of events that have influenced your character and that brought him or her where they are now.
Mhm.
Which is really cool. I don't know. I still don't understand why Tyranny wasn't and still isn't as talked about as much as it should have been or is, because I think that's a
It didn't
cult.
have as much attention because it was just like a directly published game by Paradox, and Paradox doesn't have a lot of reach as a publisher of like mainstream games. They're very, very niche. Whereas Pillars had a Kickstarter campaign that drew
Yeah.
attention to it for months and months and years before it.
That's true, but Tyranny, I consider it to be a classic of the genre. From the moment I started playing it, even though I mentioned in my review that it has some, it lacks a lot of content. You can almost see the holes in the content come kind of starting from like the 60% part of the game onward. I hope it becomes more of a cult hit because it's such a great game, such an awesome opportunity to basically play fantasy Judge Dredd, which is how I describe it. So coming back to the Ultima thing, I think that would be a great and an awesome challenge to design the games, so that the second new remade Ultima would take into consideration the earth-shattering, basically, the earth and population changing decisions you make in the first one. Because I doubt in Mass Effect the changes were that massive.
Oh no, they wave them around like they brush them out like really easily. They
Okay,
like if you put a lot of effort in the first one to save the council, there it basically doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's just fucking a cop out then.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a massive development and design endeavor, which that.
Okay. Having designed multiple choice quests, multiple option quests, and games, it's a pain in the ass. Like it takes you like at least an hour to like having the proper frame that lets you do it quickly. It takes you about an hour to implement them and test them, like to see if they work. And that entire aspect of the game takes like 5 seconds to do in game to make that choice. It takes you a lot of time.
I think it's doable, at least on a technical level. I think it's doable.
Technically, yeah, but you need a lot of time and a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the thing. Depending on whether or not you can actually implement it properly, I think that's the different. That's the real problem here. That's the real issue here.
And then you have to write clearly in the review guide. This is part 1 of 3 games. Please treat it as such.
Yeah, that also needs to be clear. But maybe, yeah, in a way in which you don't feel like it's you're playing a third of a game.
Yeah. It's a complete game, but there's going to be something after it. And speaking of review guides, have you ever gotten a review guide for a game that you've reviewed?
What's a review guide?
It's sort of like, hi, this is the. It started with a letter from the developer, usually saying, we started the game trying to do this, and we think we've made it and accomplished, and thank you for playing the game and something like that. And it shows you this is starting location, these are your characters, this is what they do. Later on, you're going to get to this part. And
I got one of those, yeah.
The last one I remember liking like a lot was the one for Pillars of Eternity. It was just amazingly made. It looked like it was made on parchment. I had the PDF version, of course, not the physical one, but it looked like it was very stylized. It looked like old manuals for games used to look like, and I actually don't know if the manual of the game looks as good as the review guide. I hope it does. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, usually when I deal with quite small indies usually, so they don't really have the sort of resources to put into making review guides, to be honest. But I have received at least one of those from a publisher that has my email, or was it from the game? I think it was from the devs and the game and whatnot. But yeah, those are interesting. But yeah, I much rather play the game. I'm not. You know what I want in a game? A decent ass tutorial. Mm-hmm. That's what I care about. That's what I care about.
So since we're getting at the 2-hour mark of this bit of a recording and the last one we made before the internet died, I think we should get close to the ending of this show.
Yeah, this is already part 2 by a long shot.
So before we go, what was your favorite review to make?
Ooh, that's
like the one that you enjoyed the most.
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you on that one. Might have been the first one, actually. Might have been the first review I made for Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, which isn't in English, unfortunately. It was me for the first time on camera. I was trying the Steven Nance's persona as a thing. So that was, and I was shooting it with my best friend. So that's always fun. In terms of games, though, I don't know. Thinking back. No, most of the reviews I make are more or less the same stuff. So I can't really. I don't think I have any sort of special sort of memory or experience with any of them, because I haven't put that much time in them. No, I put time. I didn't put the type of effort in them as I would have wanted to. Like I had an idea to make a review for Legend of Grimrock with like a bit of a funny sort of cutscene type things with a green screen and stuff like that. So maybe that would have been one of my favorite gaming ones. But otherwise, no, I don't have a super duper anything. Nothing comes to mind.
For me, I think it's a tie between two of them. One of them is the Frank Herbert's review, because I tried to do something different, something new with that one, and it always felt special. I wish I could have done more like that, but that wasn't to be. The other one was Crysis 2. That game simply pissed me off. So I made a really in-depth, long review of it. I had to make my voice sound faster on the video because I couldn't really have it render all that video without it blowing up because it was summer. And also I talked really fast. I ended up sounding like Yahtzee a bit, mixed with the guy from Extra Credits. But the result is, it is a bit of a toxicity-filled review where I tear apart pretty much everything with the game and find very few positive aspects of it to actually praise, which that may be a bit of a downside of review because they are bits of that game that can be praised. It works, for example, and well, compared to the first one, there really is. It's a downtrend completely compared to the first one, but I enjoyed it because there was a lot to make fun of. Not even make fun of, just criticizing that review. Actually, I took the time to write a script for it because I was at the point where I didn't have time to write scripts or videos. I spent like a month working on that review in the background while working on other videos. I recorded like 100 and something gigs of video out of Crysis 2 just so I could have everything put together.
Hardcore, man.
Yeah. It was hard work. I enjoyed making it. If the developers ever saw it, they probably wouldn't enjoy me making it. Wait, that's how it goes. Sometimes it's about the entertainment. I really like doing those about the entertainment. Like, okay, they did have factual information about the game in them, but they were an outlet for me. They were me letting off steam and cracking jokes and making people laugh at the same time, and that's what I really loved about them.
Yeah, something that we didn't get into vis-a-vis. Sometimes it's about the entertainment. It's also the difference in which we approach entertainment from our perspective, because we like to play and review games and actually talk about the games instead of just acting like douchebags and screaming at the camera whilst when shit pops up on screen in the game.
Well, that's why we're not famous.
Obviously, that's why. So that's a different thing. But I think the 2 episodes are pretty dense as it is. So I don't feel like we missed something by not talking about that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But we're done. I think we're done now.
Yeah. So do we have any? Oh yeah, you said you were on a break the week after this one. So what's up on your channel in the immediate future?
So well, technically speaking, this is already part 2.
Yeah, so you're already on the break.
Yeah, I'm already this weekend. I've been doing some stuff. This next week, the gaming video will be about Labyrinth, which I mentioned last time, I think. Labyrinth is one of those games that I played more than 2 years ago in early access, and it's still going. It's a free-to-play now game, and it looks better and it's cooler than it was 2 years ago, actually. It's a collectible card game, but with several twists. It's really nice. It's really cool. And for the Nonsense Cast, I don't know what I'll be doing this week on Nonsense Cast, because I don't really have anything planned per se. Still gonna be a bit of time between us recording and this going out, so I'll have time to watch some shit and then talk about some shit. So I don't know about the Nonsense Cast, but the gaming video will be about the Labyrinth.
Cool.
You?
Well, looking at the schedule, you've probably already seen the let's see. Oh yeah, X to the Threat was on history last week. If I found a way to get it, I have it on a DVD, but I don't have a DVD drive, so I'm probably gonna have to buy it off GOG or something. And this week should be Project Eden, which is a really old adventure, not even really old, 2001 action-adventure game that I played the demo of a lot. Never the full game, so I'm going to have to find a full game and dig it out and make a show about it.
I haven't really heard about it, to be honest. I don't think.
Yeah, it was sort of a squad-based adventure game that I think it had some combat in it, but it mostly behaved like a 3D version of Lost Vikings if it were an adventure game. Where each character had a thing.
That sounds convoluted, to be honest.
Yeah, each character had their own skill sets. If I remember, I'm gonna play it again, see if it's what I remember it was.
Ideally, yeah. Okay, that sounds convoluted, but I'm definitely interested because I've never heard about the title.
I played the demo of it like in 2002 or 2003, a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's it for the show. Hope you enjoy this 2-parter. If not, well, you can write a review of it in the comments. We look forward to reading it and seeing what score you give it. Hopefully it'll be 7 out of 10.
That should or a 7.4. That's definitely something to look forward to.
What was the thing? There was a meme about scores: 5 out of 9 or 5 out of 7. A solid. God damn it, I forget it. There was a meme recently.
I don't know that one, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
There was a meme where somebody scored, the 5 out of 7 meme.
Okay, I don't know it, but 5 out of 7 doesn't sound that bad.
Yeah, somebody gave Fight Club a review score of 5 out of 7, and that became a sort of a meme. Everybody just keeps giving Things 5-7.
Works at on a certain level. Oh yeah. Also, don't forget, dear listeners, to use the GaminGHD GOG code, because Unicom keeps mentioning that games are on GOG, but never reminds you that there is a GaminGHD GOG code in the description to use
Yeah, I
it.
kind of forgot about it because I don't actually know what the code is. Raul has to put it in.
It's not like it's yes. The code is the bunny eats bandages at night.
The
That's
code
not
is
the code.
the code's a real long string of characters.
Yeah, it's not like you said you don't know the code. Yeah, it's not a fucking password, man. It's a link. But yeah, I listened to your Serious Sam video and you were mentioning GOG, and I'm like, yeah, come on, mention the code. Mention the code.
About it.
Of course, he didn't mention the code. So yeah, please do that. Support these guys as much as possible, and check out my channel also.
Yeah. Goodbye, people.
See you next time.